Now, John Stuart Mill is a famous consequentialist. Today we're looking at his top 5 ideas in ethics, and stick around to the end for a surprising idea by Mill. Before diving into Mill's top 5 ideas, let me welcome you to the Philosophical Life. I'm Dr. Christopher Cloos. I teach philosophy, and I designed this channel to share with you the power of philosophy to transform your mind and life. Consider subscribing to this channel and click the bell so you don't miss any future videos. John Stuart Mill embraces a version of consequentialism called utilitarianism. So the right action maximizes happiness or pleasure when compared to other actions you might perform. Promoting happiness or pleasure is the ultimate goal of morality. But you might wonder if all forms of pleasure carry equal weight, or are some types of pleasure more valuable? This leads to the first idea from Mill. Idea number 1 is that intellectual pleasures are more valuable than pure physical pleasures. So Jeremy Bentham was a utilitarian that lived before Mill. Bentham thought of all pleasure being qualitatively similar, so all pleasure has roughly equal value in doing the utilitarian calculation to discover what's right or wrong. But Mill and others pointed out that this leads to an objection to utilitarianism, namely that it's suited best for like fat and happy swine. In response, Mill refines utilitarianism. He notes that intellectual pleasures are more valuable than pure physical pleasures. Solving a puzzle, playing chess, and writing a book are qualitatively better than just, say, eating chocolate cake, getting a massage, and smelling flowers. Though intellectual pleasures are often accompanied by toil and produce less immediate gratification, they're intrinsically more satisfying than fleeting physical pleasures. This leads Mill to the memorable quote from his book Utilitarianism, which I'll link to in the description. Quote, "It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied." If you think it's better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied, leave, quote, "examined life" in the comments below. Leave, quote, "happy pig" in the comments below if you think the reverse. Now, idea number 2 is that everyone's happiness counts equally. My happiness is not more important than yours. This makes sense. When you think about moral people from history, who comes to mind? Probably people like Gandhi, Jesus, and Mother Teresa. Why were they moral? They stood for others. They loved others well. This often came at the expense of their own happiness. They didn't value their own happiness above the happiness of others. When you think of immoral people from history, who comes to mind? Probably people like Hitler, Stalin, and serial killer like Ted Bundy. Why are they immoral? Well, they inflicted their own agenda on others. They harmed others ultimately in the name of their own self-interest. They valued their happiness above the happiness of others. But you might think there's a problem with this feature of Mill's ethics. What about parents and their children? Isn't part of being a good parent being partial toward the happiness of your child? If you're deciding whether, for instance, to take your child to the zoo or to donate that time to a local homeless shelter, are you doing something immoral by favoring taking your kid to the zoo? Imagine that helping the homeless at the homeless shelter would have a greater net impact on happiness. Your child would be a little bit happier, but more people at the homeless shelter would be made happy. What do you think about this objection? Do you think it works? Or can Mill's utilitarianism capture why it's morally okay to sometimes be partial toward yourself or your own family? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Idea number 3, motives are irrelevant to an action's morality. Deontology, or duty-based ethics, is the biggest rival to consequentialism. A deontological theory like Kantian ethics focuses on whether actions align with moral imperatives. Your duty is to perform the action that aligns with the moral law, and your action only has moral worth when you perform it from a sense of duty or out of respect for the moral law. Your intentions matter morally. For utilitarianism, your intentions are irrelevant. Mill thinks we often act from mixed motives. Motives might determine whether a person is a good or bad person, but motives do not determine whether the act the person performs is morally right. You can do the right thing from the wrong motives if I judge that I must save a person who's drowning because I see that the person is a rich person I know, then my motive is a big cash reward from saving them. Though I save the person from a motive that reflects poorly on me, I still perform the morally right action. So being motivated to do your duty for Mill doesn't make the action have greater moral value or worth. Idea number 4 is that morality doesn't require huge self-sacrifice. Now, this idea from Mill comes as a response to an objection to utilitarianism, namely that it's too demanding. If the point of morality is happiness and right actions maximize net happiness, then living a moral life appears to require great sacrifice or being saintly. It's like immoral to spend money on my dog when that same money could save a person's life. Utilitarianism may require huge self-sacrifice in the name of promoting the greater good. Now, Mill responds by saying that individuals aren't required by utilitarianism to make huge self-sacrifices. Most people aren't in the position to make large-scale impact through being generous. People like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they have the resources, the cash money to make a large difference in minimizing suffering around the globe, so they're obligated to do so. But small potatoes like me and probably you don't have such resources, so we're not required to do the same. It is not morally wrong for me to buy my dog a toy instead of donating that money to charity. Idea number 5, utilitarianism isn't necessarily a godless theory of ethics. This last idea is a bit shocking when you think about utilitarianism. You might think of contemporary utilitarians like Peter Singer. He's an atheist. Utilitarianism seems to take God out of the picture. Ultimate moral intrinsic value isn't found in God's commands, divine law as revealed in Scripture, or any other religious thing. Instead, the capacity to experience pain and pleasure, sentience, is the foundation for the ultimate thing of moral value, namely happiness. And maximizing that is what makes acts morally right. There's no need for God, or so it seems. Why does he say that utilitarianism and God aren't mutually incompatible as a foundation for morality? Well, Mill thinks whether the existence of God is compatible with utilitarianism or not depends on your view of God. If you think God's ultimate desires for people is that they be happy, then utilitarianism isn't necessarily godless. God's will for humanity is compatible with the principle of utility. God's commands things because they're good, because they ultimately lead his creatures to happiness and away from pain and suffering. If you're a divine command theorist and you think things are morally good simply because God commands them, then your view of God is incompatible with utilitarianism. On such a view, God might command people to commit genocide, which inflicts a massive amount of pain and suffering on people, and such an act would be morally good just because God commanded it. What do you think about this idea from Mill that utilitarianism is not necessarily a godless doctrine, it just matters how you view God? Do you find it plausible? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And as always, keep thinking philosophically and keep living the philosophical life.